G'day, welcome. Hello, everyone. Thanks. Anyone watching? Obviously, this gets recorded as well. So those watching post recording, thank you for taking your time to watch this as well. Hello to LinkedIn Live as well, which is where we broadcast this from too. And one of our favorite things, obviously, to do is answer questions as well. You can log questions, you can make comments. They come through to us. We see them, and I'll try and pop them up on the screen here or address questions and go through them. But we absolutely thrive on that because we find it to just be such an effective way to give you things that are going to help. Oh, g'day from Greece. Look at that. I'll show you.
Yeah,
Look, this is what happens.
Efharisto. That's my only
Dimitri is
Greek
from
phrase I
Greece.
know. Efharisto.
Oh, what does that mean?
I think it means, what does it mean, Dimitri? Is that hello or thank
Yes,
you?
you're about to be corrected if you're wrong.
I know it's something very unoffensive.
Okay,
That's all I know. I'm
good.
hoping.
Excellent. Well, thanks for tuning in, Dimitri. And if you do have any questions throughout the stream, please ask. Same for everyone. Bravo. Yeah, we're here to answer, and we did come up with a bit of a topic for. Means thank you. Okay,
Yeah,
thank you, Dimitri. We did come up with a little bit of a topic for today, and that is money and talking all things money in the design space. I think having a bit of a topic for us can guide us in what we might cover and maybe help give you ideas about certain questions you might want to ask about that topic. But we don't want to limit it to only that. But that is what we'll try and dig into today. When we say money, I think we're talking salaries, we're talking contract rates, we're talking how do designers get paid, we're talking how do things work. I know Erica mentioned to me at one point the other day about dispelling some myths about how recruiters maybe work with their fee structures and how that impacts maybe the designer's income. And trade secret, it does not impact your income ever. So trust me, you get paid first always. Maybe that's a little place to start. Let's dispel a couple of money myths about recruiters, or even just mention them out loud. Some of the ones we've heard over the years. I can kick us off with one. Recruiters often increase the salary of designers when they're sending them to a client, to a company, or when they're negotiating. A recruiter will try to drive the salary up because it increases the recruiter's fee. So that's a little myth I've heard. I would love to bust out of that one if we can. But have you guys ever heard that?
Yeah, or people think that we're taking our fee. So just so people know how this works, like we get our
Yeah.
fee from the client, which is the company that's hiring. So just like from a nomenclature perspective, there's the
Yes.
client that's the hiring company. There's the candidate who's the job seeker, who is probably most of you, like if you're going to find a job. And so I think some job seekers, some candidates think like, oh, okay, I'm not going to make as much money. I could say that I want to make 160, but the offer is coming in at 150. And then maybe the recruiter is like pocketing that extra 10K, or I can't make the amount of money that I'd make because the client can't pay, the fee and my salary. So, I mean, maybe that could ostensibly happen in like a super small, like, 3-person startup or a mom and pop little agency or something. Like I could see like maybe, oh, we have like a really limited budget. Like we need to figure out how much we can pay each party. So I could see it ostensibly happening. But I think if a company is like, on solid legs, it's got solid funding, they have money, they have budget, not only to hire, but they usually have recruitment budget too.
It's a separate budget.
Right. And I think especially for, everybody in this conversation, design is such a niched, specialized discipline that not a lot of generalist recruiters really know how to recruit for it. Right. Like there's a whole nother aspect to design recruiting, which is not just what you do and what your skills are and what you're looking for, but it's like your actual portfolio. So not many recruiters, you have to be specialized in this field to really know how to walk through a portfolio, how to look at it, how to interpret it. Is this going to match what the client needs? So I think, especially for design, I think a lot of outside recruiters are, engaged for design specific searches because
Yes.
it isn't something that a lot of their internal teams really can nail.
Right. And
They can,
because of that,
but yeah.
the budget gets allocated from a recruitment pool, which is separate to the budget for their salary pool. So
Yeah.
the company is not, if we got to spend this on someone's salary, then that means there's less of a fee, or that it's coming from the same total number. That's not the case. So yeah, that is a really good point. Off the back of that, one of the things I've heard from a couple of design leaders that have hired, they had thought that, if the designer's salary is higher, obviously your fee is higher because our fee can be a percentage based fee. We are paid, say, our fee is 20% of whatever you offer that designer, whatever you hire them for. If that designer, if their salary is $200,000, then the recruitment fee is $40,000. But some of those design leaders, the myth that I have heard is that, you try to drive that salary up. Oh, no, the designer wants 210 or 220, because the higher that number is, that obviously means that percentage-wise, our fee would technically be higher. But I would say from my experience, it is such a small difference that it is not enough to drive up a salary. And it is unethically relevant, or it's just not ethical or important to me in that regard. I think that the fee that we have agreed upon is fair and good. Hopefully we've established that at the start. And then at the end of the day, when it comes to a salary negotiation on in that specific area, I don't need to drive up their salary to get myself a bigger fee. The time to maybe discuss a higher salary is because that is what the designer needs to say yes. And if you like that person and you want to hire them, then that's the outcome that I want. We all got the same shared outcome. It's really not fee dependent, to the point where I will back myself and say, I will fix my fee at that original salary goal. You had a budget of 200,000 on the base salary for this person. I will fix my fee at that. If at the end of the day, the salary goes a little bit higher in order for you to get this person, to get it over the line, then it doesn't change my fee. You can take that variable out of the equation, because it is not my fee is fine. I'm comfortable and happy with that. We have agreed on that. I don't need to drive up a thing just to nickel and dime a few more bucks out of you. It's really not of importance. So I really want to squash that myth myself too when it comes to money. Yeah, thank you.
That's the visual representation.
That is squashing of the myth.
Yes.
So yeah, that is one that I've heard, and it's not the case.
I think sometimes what can happen is sometimes I'll submit a candidate at a certain salary range. And so the client will say, okay, great, this is what we're expecting this to be. But that can shift. Like during the course of the search, this candidate's getting other offers that are coming in higher than what I put them in at. And they're like, oh, all of a sudden I was going to accept a 200, but now I'm getting these sweet other deals. So now it needs to be 220 to get me over the finish line. We try to explain this to our clients as plainly as we can, but sometimes that's just the way the market goes. It's not us trying to raise the money so that we can make our, kind of pittance of an extra percentage on that, to your point, Jared. But it's like, what's going to actually get you what you want?
Yeah.
Maybe it's going to take that extra 20K to get this person to say yes. Yeah, that can happen.
Absolutely.
Yeah. There's a lot of strategy that goes into our client relationships. Like what you said, Jared, about capping our fee. I mean, that is something. And so I just want to tell people that we're not the big bad guys. We're here to help you. So if we have to reduce our end and what we get so that you get hired and you get a job, and also so that we elongate this client relationship with whoever it is so that they come back to us for more hires or other team hires, not just design. I mean, we can bend the most. We don't want to, but we have to, and those conversations have to be at the beginning. So that's why we ask them, what is your budget? And if they can't go over $40,000, and the salaries for what they're expecting are probably in the mid 200s, okay, then we will cap our fee at a certain whatever. But we also need some buy-in from them too, right? So we're not going to just spin our wheels and work on it. We would ideally maybe an upfront commencement fee, which is a retainer, so that we're guaranteed, payment at the end of it. But this is our job. Our job is to help you, and we do have empathy. Some of us, I think, so.
Definitely.
Our goal is to help you. Yeah,
absolutely.
That's what we want at the end of the day. We just want people to be at a company they're happy at. It is the client that's paying us. So ultimately we answer to the company, just so that's clear. We are here to fill their role with the best candidate possible. But at the same time, our relationship with you as the candidate, the job seeker, is also super important to us.
Very important.
Maybe you're not the one paying us at the placement time, but just having that long-term relationship with you is super, super important to us. Just, from us enjoying our jobs and building relationships just at face value is great. I think we're all in recruiting because we actually care about people and like people, and we're interacting with all sorts of different people all day long. But it's also just, it's a giving relationship as time goes on. Maybe we'll hire people through us. Maybe we'll place you in another role in the future. It's the gift that keeps on giving.
Yeah. I think what I try to remind myself of constantly, and what I like to remind any company I work with as much as possible, and also these designers that we're working with, is shared goals. We have a shared goal all the time. We're not trying to do certain things in terms of being a recruiter or having fees or costing a certain amount of money just to get in the way. We bring a value, but we all have this shared goal most of the time of that company needs to hire. That designer would like a great job that they're interested in. We would like to bring the value that we can bring. It's a shared goal. And so sometimes these fees and things like that, for me, push that to the side at the moment and really focus on what is our shared goal here and how do we get after that. Let's not be clouded by these peripheral things that you think might be getting in the way when actually we're actually trying to achieve the same thing. It's funny that you talk, Erica, about compromise and flex. It's a lot of the time in negotiations and trying to get things to a completion point, I think that the recruiter can often be the one that has to do the flex. The company can do what they can, the candidate can do what they can, but sometimes, and in my experience, the biggest difference as to why someone gets hired and why they don't can be our flex as well. I'll tell you a story that happened a couple of years ago. Hopefully it doesn't set a precedent now that I'm telling it, but I had a company, early stage startup, loved this head of design. We had been working on this search for a while, and I had really gone pretty extensive in a peak market in a very challenging time when candidates were few and far between. And I'd done a lot of people had been interviewed. It was deep. This company really liked this person, but they had a price tag, and the price tag was decent. I think it was fair, but it was high. It was higher than what a small sort of seed stage company could do. It was higher than, what the C-suite was paying themselves. So there was a gap, but they wanted to hire them, but they just could not get the salary there. I think the gap ultimately came down to about $30,000 on a base salary, which we know is kind of enough of a gap that someone will walk away from that. That's a little bit too big of a delta, I think, for some people to make a compromise. I knew that they probably weren't going to find someone else that they liked as much. It had already been going on for months. So I ended up taking that $30,000 out of my fee and giving it to the designer as a sign-on bonus to close the gap and to close the delta. I still ended up with a fee. Obviously, I had something for my time and all my efforts, but it was a pretty substantial chunk of my fee. But it was the difference between them having a designer on board that they loved, which did some great work with them, me actually completing what we had set out to do, which is to hire them ahead of design, and this designer being able to work with the people that they wanted to work with. So, and this was a peak market. This was challenging. You got to do what you got to do the same way that at times in other markets when it feels like the companies have a little bit more negotiating power, our fees can also take a bit of a shift with market rates. So again, recruiters aren't the bad guys, and they'll do what they can to achieve the mission and achieve the goal of bringing all these sides together. And that to me is just an example of what I'm willing to do at times for something that I see a reason to do. Will every recruiter do that? No, they don't have to either. I mean, it was a pretty crazy time, but I'm still happy that I did it. even though it sounds like a pretty substantial chunk of change now when I say it out loud.
Well, I think that's an interesting story because it brings up the idea of like different markets. Like you touched on, that
Yes.
was a crazy market. Like 2022, like we could not
Mhm.
beat off clients fast enough with the stick. I mean, it was just like, do you have a designer? Do you have a designer? Do you have a designer?
Yeah.
And it was just like, whoa. And then, designers that were repping, same thing.
Mhm.
Like you guys were fielding like 6 different offers at the same
Yep.
time. It was all about speed to market, scheduling people really quickly. Like it was just such a different strategy.
Yes.
And the negotiation strategy is different in a down market like this, right? So I think there's still things that hold true.
Mhm.
That in an up market like 2022, you didn't actually have to have a lot of strategy. If you were a designer and you're getting 3 or 4 or even 2 different competing offers, there's not a lot of strategy there. You can just say, okay,
Yeah.
like, let me just weigh, okay, how much does money matter to me? Money isn't everything, certainly. I mean, it can be the most important thing to certain people, and that's not a bad thing. It's just what's important to you.
Yeah.
Like maybe it's quality of life. Maybe it's like the product that you're working on. I think like the people that you work with, and I'm sure Erica and Jared, you probably hear this from designers all the time too.
Mhm.
When I'm doing intake with designers, when I'm doing my initial screen, what are the most important things to you? Oftentimes,
Mm.
it's being at a company that really values design, where you don't have to evangelize morning, noon, and
Yep.
night. There's always going
Yep.
to be some of it because you're a designer and that's what you do. But I don't have to like spend my whole day doing it. But also just like that, I love the people. And that's so important. There was actually a great podcast from Mel Robbins, who I love.
Mhm.
Do you guys know Mel Robbins?
No,
Yeah.
fill us in.
Oh, she's
Real quick.
great. She's like this really plucky blonde woman from Boston. She got really famous doing this TED Talk like maybe 10 years ago or something.
Mhm.
And they interviewed her afterwards and she's like, I was so nervous and I lost my head. I didn't even know what I was saying. But at the very end of her speech, when she was just so tongue-tied and just petrified,
Yeah.
she basically talked about the 5-second rule, which is you count yourself down from 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then you do the thing that you had the instinct to do, but then your body, like your mind is going to talk you out of doing it. So it's like
Oh.
doing that scary thing, talking to that hot person at the bar that you like, maybe don't want to go talk to, or like,
Yeah.
asking for that raise or, whatever it might
Yeah.
be. So she got really famous doing that. And now she has this top rated podcast. And one of the podcast sessions that she did talked about how you spend your hours of your day and how important it is to be with people that you love to work with.
Mhm.
Because between the ages of like 18 and when you retire, those are the people that you tend to see the most, like even more
Yeah.
than like a spouse or a partner or your kids or friends, like your workmates are
Yeah.
your biggest influence in your happiness and
Mhm.
like who you're hanging out with and the conversations you're having, which becomes your life, right? Like that becomes your life. So just
Yeah.
loving who you're working with is really important. So anyway, this is a very long-winded side tributary to saying that, in a down market, how you negotiate, maybe you are negotiating stronger on those other things. Like maybe money isn't
Mhm.
the most important thing. Companies have a little less of it these days. They're
Yep.
negotiating harder because they know that you, as the person who wants a job, is probably going to be a little more flexible on money. So this just, I think
Mm.
there's like different ways of thinking about negotiating in this market that would be different than just like the natural negotiation of like, oh, I like this job the best and it's paying me the most, and or I just like the people the most, I'm going to take that one. Now it's a
Yeah.
little
Job
different.
done. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think negotiating itself is a whole interesting topic. That's a whole space that we could totally go into. But I think for a general question, I would ask both of you, do you think rates have gone down, up, the same, roughly to say, let's say 12 months ago and then 24 months ago, or, going back, where do you think rates are for this part of 2024,
I,
quarter
I
two?
mean, I definitely think they have. It really frustrates me. I think it's
You think
like,
they've gone down?
oh yeah, I
Yep.
think they've gone down. I think, I don't know, depends on the level of somebody. They could
Sure.
go up. I mean, for sure. But I do think what I'm hearing from people is that, they want everything in the kitchen sink
Mm.
for $65
Mhm.
an hour instead of $120 an hour that would have been last year.
Yeah.
And it really truly like depresses me to a point where I can't even,
It's
I
challenging.
just don't think it's fair. And I think it's ridiculous, but
Mm.
there's going to be somebody who will take it because they need to right now. And that's just where we are, unfortunately, today.
Yep.
Um, so I think, it depends. And I think
Yeah.
if this is hourly, I think you have to be really firm about the hours that you work. If it goes over the certain amount of
Mm.
hours that you set, you need to say like, okay, I can't go over 20 hours. If it does, if the work needs to go to 30 hours, then I require X, Y, Z. Like really be in control of your time.
That's a good point. What about yourself, Joanne? Do you think salaries, just as a general thermometer, maybe have a vibe of where they're at?
Yeah.
For
So
you?
I think product design and UX salaries, I haven't seen a super big hit. I think, Erica, I think
Yeah.
hourly it has taken a hit. I think,
Yep.
maybe like a fluctuation of like 10% of where it used to be. So I kind of think of the market as like, okay, what's 2022, I think of as just like the gravy train
Right.
days. Like, no, it's everybody's making more money than God, right? Like you can't, like you can't stop
Yeah.
getting offers every which way, even if you don't want them, right? So I think of like 2021 and before then as basically being like a sort of a sane standard of where salaries were before things got cuckoo. So I
Yeah.
think we're actually back to where things were like pre-cuckoo. Like I think
Yeah.
it feels
Yeah,
like it's that's a technical term.
I agree. I think companies are trying to like actually stick to bands that they had previously and level out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know that we'll ever see those 2021 salaries.
I think what that time showed us was like companies typically paid above the band for almost any hire. They had to pay, in this very recent peak time, this kind of 2021, 2022 sort of period. We saw most companies paying above their salary band, and maybe even as the inverse of what you're saying, Erica, of hiring people with less experience than maybe what the role needed, like making compromises on certain areas and certain skills, and paying above the band to make the hire. And I think that this year, what I have felt is it's not necessarily dropped on a salary front, right? They're not necessarily lower, but we've just come back into the band, which has been pretty consistent, sort of, as you said, Joanne, before that crazy time. We've come back into the band, but I think people are expecting a little more bang for buck at the minute.
Or a lot more in some cases.
Well, a lot more, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But when they say, for the most part, if you were to say like a lead level product designer, you're probably going to expect that salary band to be, say, 160 to 190K as a real general kind of band, right? So it's about the same, but who they want and what they expect in that band is pretty high. They really want someone to truly fulfill, the responsibilities, the requirements, the expectations that they want to get for that band. But that 160 to 190 number, I don't think that's necessarily less than it's ever been before. I think that's been pretty consistent for a few years now. But to get that, it's like, you got to be a 11 out of 10 fit at the moment.
It's true. I think there's an embarrassment of riches on the kind of candidate supply side, which actually is kind of an interesting sort of sales proposition for us working with clients, right? Because I talked about this on a Design Unfiltered a couple of Design Unfiltered ago, where I posted something on LinkedIn for a freelance job and I got completely inundated with people. So I think clients are experiencing the same thing. Like companies post something on LinkedIn or they post it to their channels, and I think they're just getting an onslaught of people. So it's like, how do they actually go through all of these profiles? And I think that's where we as recruiters can come in and say, hey, don't mess with that. Let us come in, give you 5 top profiles here. Here's 5 people that will most likely work out for you. Maybe we'll do like a little secondary search if they're not hitting the mark.
Yeah.
You tell us exactly what's going to help us zero in. So I think that's kind of changed like our positioning in the market, where it's just coming like helping sort through all of that. But yes, I think companies are certainly looking for people that have like more of the subject matter expertise and what they're looking for. So for example, I'm just going to kind of throw this out there. Like, let's say it's like, a veterinary company, when maybe in the past they're like, oh, okay, if people have healthcare, that would be great, but it's not required. It's like, now I kind of feel like that company would say like, they have to have veterinary like, specific, like horses in Davis, California, like just like very, very specific parameters. because I think they're taking less chances on like, we don't really want this to be a growth position that the person is stepping up into. We got
Mm,
to know that for our bucks, which are limited, that this person can already do the job, or it's
yeah,
very close that they can already do the job, and they have that lingo, they've got the tribal language, they can just plug
yeah,
and play, and we don't have to worry about it.
yeah, yeah. I would say I think this year so far, for the most part, any designers I've hired haven't taken a full pay cut necessarily or taken a big drop. But I think it has been pretty challenging to get a substantial increase
Yeah.
from maybe
Mm,
their previous salary, especially
yeah.
depending on when they got their last job. If they got their last job in, say, 2022, maybe they came in at a pretty top dollar, maybe above the band, and now they're having to play within the bandings of their kind of level, and that could be technically a little bit lower. But yeah, I think it's been challenging for designers to maybe take big increases to get large increases. And I think for designers that are maybe in roles already, like to get that increase is challenging. For designers that are out of work and maybe have been out of work for 6 months now.
Yeah.
That's where it's like, is
Mhm.
that something to be a little bit competitive on? Um, can salary be a factor? I don't want anyone to ever take a drop. I'll be the first to tell. I don't ever want you to take less money. But I also know from a market perspective, skills bring a value. This is where this is around about the level your perceived value sits. If you're telling me a number that is way above the perceived value that I think most of the market would see you at,
Mm,
then I think that's hard. I don't know anyone that can do anything about that for you.
yeah,
But yeah,
yeah.
I really don't want people to take drops, but I have seen it this year. That's for sure. People
Well, I think if
taking some
somebody's out of work
compromise.
for so long, sometimes you just need money in the door, and it's okay.
Absolutely.
It's okay
Yeah.
to take a cut. Maybe it's temporary.
Hmm.
Freelancing, certainly
Yep.
freelancing is a great way just to get some money in the door while you're looking for a full-time job. So being flexible on hourly rates, I think, is good as well. Again, not overly like you want to, I
Mm,
think going in with like a strong, like a number that you only know, like, your own finances, right? Like what
yeah.
will work for you. Like that's a very
Yeah.
individual decision. And I think knowing like, okay, what's your bottom walkaway point is a really good number to know. You should
Yeah.
start negotiations above that number. You don't want to start with that number because it can only go down from there
Yeah.
in negotiations. But I think just having a sense of like, okay, where's a range that I could play? And sometimes if you have to meet the bottom of your range and maybe your bottom actually lowers the more time that you're out of work,
Mm, mm,
like just, but I think there's a lot of value in just being in action, right? Like just if
yes.
you're working as opposed to just sitting around being worried, twiddling your thumbs, or being on LinkedIn, obsessing about it all day. Like actually, I think that can make you mentally just spin
Yeah.
and actually not create a lot of traction and forward movement. That's the old adage of, oh, if you have something that you need done, give it to a busy person. I think
Mm,
there really is a lot of value in that. Like I remember when
yeah.
I quit my staffing agency job, like back in the day, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna get like super fit. I'm gonna get all this stuff done around the house I've been wanting to get done. Like I thought I was gonna be like Magic Woman. I got nothing done. I was not on a schedule. I was like in my PJs until 12. It was just a shit
Wow.
show. Pardon my French. Um, but there is something about like having a reason to get up and you're being productive and you're in that mindset,
Yeah.
which I think can actually really help you in your job search.
Yeah, that's a really good point. That's beneficial. What's been your take on engaging with companies that are hiring and helping guide them on their expectations with salaries? I don't know if you've had an experience in the last, say, 12 months where maybe the money that they're quoting to you is really misaligned to the expectation that they have to hire, i.e., we want a lead level product designer. They're going to own this thing. They really need to come in. They're going to be end to end. We want them to have at least probably 8 to 10 years experience. And we're thinking, 100 to 120,000 per year, which we know is drastically different. Are you seeing things like this from companies, or maybe you've seen that over your time? And, do we push back? Giving, I guess, our audience a bit of an insight that as recruiters, we're not just saying yes to everything too. We are
Right.
guiding companies that get what they pay for as well when it comes to their talent.
Right. Like none of us three would take on a search that we don't think is placeable.
No.
Right? Like that it's us spinning our wheels. It's wasting time. It's actually not getting the client what they want. It's not getting the candidate what they want. So I haven't seen rates that low that you just quoted in terms of that. I mean, that would be like, there's a lot of education that needs to happen between us and the client. Like, this is what the market is bearing. Here's what people in this salary, like, this is what the salary range can give you. Like if someone's like, hey, I want to lead, but I can only pay 1 to 120. I'll say, okay, if that's like definitely your budget and that's all you have, this is what that money will get you. Like, it's not going to be your lead, but maybe it's like a mid-level person. Maybe it's somebody right a year or two out of school. Is this something you could work with? Would that still be helpful? And we might take it on if they can change their requirements.
Expectation. Yeah.
Right. But I think, going back to what you were saying before, like now that somebody needs to meet 11 out of the 10 requirements, that's also a lot of education.
Which is it?
And just kind of negotiation. That's a constant conversation that we're having with our clients too, is, not everybody's going to check off all the boxes. That happens in everything in life, right? Like you're never going to find on the candidate side, like you're never going to find that perfect job that fulfills you in every which way. You're not going to find that perfect romantic partner that just never annoys you in any way, right? Like, but if somebody's making like 8 out of 10 and the 2 things that aren't there you can live with, aren't that big of a deal.
You can learn and grow into.
Yeah. So I think
it's still a win.
It's finding the flexibility on all sides just to make something work if it's meant to, if it feels good.
Yeah. I think that there is elements in the market at the moment too of just some positive reinforcement when it comes to finding strong fit. I think there's a lot of designers out there right now that can do the job, would do the job, would take that money, but maybe there's someone just slightly more aligned and it just positively reinforces that company like, oh, okay, well, we got 9 out of 10 with our fit. We did find that person that can do that. So, I think it's a challenging time because of that large amount of people out there, large amount of designers out there looking and getting some of that reinforcement. But yeah, I still feel overall, I've not seen anyone have to take some crazy drop or accept some ridiculous rate. I really don't think that's necessarily the case. And I just want to kind of try to drive that home a bit because I feel like I've seen some people say and talk about that, and I just really don't believe it to be the case. There'll always be a few bad apples out there, companies trying to get away with something, maybe, and saying something a bit silly in terms of a rate versus an expectation. But I still think for the most part, there are a lot of great companies still paying very fair, good value for the skills that they expect. And I still think designers have been properly valued, I think, for what they do.
And I think it's a numbers game too. I think, less because there's so many candidates on the market. I think as a candidate, you will need to go through more job interview processes to find your fit, right? Because you have more competition. I hate to put it in those terms, but it is true.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so you have less of a chance of it going to completion, which means that, instead of taking it personally or feeling bad about it, just look at it from like as a robot. Like put on your best robot brain and say, okay, this is a numbers game. So if they have more numbers of candidates to choose from, that means that I need to be in more interview processes, not so many that you can't manage the process anymore, right? Like it's driving you crazy and you can't keep track of who you're talking to about what, but enough that you're covering your bases.
Increasing your chances.
Yeah, exactly.
Enough irons in the fire.
Exactly.
Yeah. I want to, why don't we share a little bit about specifically contracting as a designer? We are seeing a fair amount of that too. It is what can be a little bit of a compromise at the moment for some companies, maybe not quite in a spot to bring on someone full time, but maybe entertaining a contract person to help. But rates wise, how do recruiters work on the contract basis? How do recruiters get paid out of that? It's not a fee, it's a margin. Right. And we often see some content out there about, contracting through a recruiter, they take half your money. You could be getting paid twice as much if you went direct to the client. Okay, what do we think about that? Like, how does that work? Maybe a quick, I don't know, Erica, you want to share a quick rundown on how contracting works? We do.
How does contracting work? there's a lot that goes into it.
Yeah.
I think that, yes, let's say if you get a job direct, you'll probably make more money directly with them. That is not a lie. However, we are delivering contractors to an opportunity that maybe you would never have known about. Really great opportunities, and
you didn't have access to.
Yeah, that you would never even have access to. I just saw something the other day that was like 80% of jobs aren't even posted that are in need of being filled. And also it's a speed game too. So as soon as you see something, don't wait to like apply immediately when you see it, because if there's 400 or 4,000 applications, chances are they're just going to go through the first couple that went through because it's urgent. Anyways,
I agree.
So I do think, but the way that it works is like you have your rate. So we are always going to ask you like, hey, what's your range? Just so we have the information. We're going to push as hard as we can to get you the high number that you need, but it's good for us to know your range in case there's like a specific budget from them. So when we go to the client, then they tell us their budget. So then we have to, as recruiters, again, we bend. We're the ones like trying to make it work. We're trying to hit their range. We'll also try to, hey, can you add $5 or $10 onto this rate? It's like too small, etc. But it depends on, I guess, how you bill as a contractor, right? So most people really are W-2s, which means that in order for you to get paid, you have to you cost something. You have to go on
payroll tax.
Yeah.
So all sorts of administrative fees.
All the taxes at the end of the year, right? So that number, whatever that value is, goes on top of your hourly rate. And then there's a fee or our introduction to the company on top of that. So that's what ends up bending, because the payroll cost cannot bend. That is like
it's fixed.
A law.
Yeah. No compromise there.
No compromise there. So that's how it works. And we're not trying to say like, hey, you have to take $10 less so we can make money. Like, we're all trying to have it's supposed to be a win-win-win for everybody.
Yeah. I guarantee that the recruiter does not make the same amount of money as you.
Guarantee.
It doesn't work that way.
No.
Absolutely not. Not even close. Not
Literally
even close.
Laughable.
So that's interesting, Erica, because our structure is different. So I used to work at a staffing agency that did actually employ the freelancer with the W-2 and the payroll stuff. So we actually, in my company now, because it's just the two of us, like we don't payroll people. We're just too small for that to work. So we actually do a different structure. So this might be interesting for people to know. There's just many, many different ways that this can work. So when we send a candidate to a client, we only have our finder's fee, which is a percentage of your rate. Again, that does not come off your rate. That's just on top of your rate that the client is paying. And then you would bill the client as you would as an independent contractor. So you're on 1099. You are supposed to, technically supposed to use your own equipment. Sometimes they provide a laptop. It just depends on the client. But you basically bill the client. Usually it's like every 2 weeks with like net 30 days pay. That's pretty standard. That can flex depending on the client. And then and then you have to tell us the number of hours that you worked in that last 2-week period. And then we tack on, so your number of hours times our percentage finder's fee, then we send that to the client separately. So the client's getting 2 bills, one from us, one from the freelancer. The nice thing that clients like about that, I mean, it is more of a pain in the ass for them to like send 2 checks out. But because we only have the finder's fee and not the payroll fee, we can actually tend to find freelancers at like kind of the normal rate that they would normally get, because sometimes when the rate is really high, it just limits the pool of people that we can find. So it just makes it provides a good amount of choice, a little more admin work, but and we don't take the taxes out. Like that's something that you would do as the candidate, as the freelancer. But that's just that's another way that people work, and I'm sure there's probably many other ways that people work too.
Yeah, we call that a trailing margin. So your margin comes trailing after the person sends their invoice, direct to the company. I've definitely worked on that as well over the years, done that with certain companies. I've got some agreements in place like that as well. I think like any of these things at any time, there's pros and cons to all of it. and there's ebbs and flows, and there's situations that suit a structure better than others. One recent scenario I had was a company that wasn't great at paying on time, that were not very good at filling their invoices, were often late, or, there were certain things like this. But because I ran them through my payrolling third-party provider, shout out Agile Partnering. I'm going to send you their link as well, Joanne, because they're very good people to know.
Great.
Al's over there is a legend, but they provide a payroll service. Now, in this case, they hold the agreement with this end company that is responsible for basically paying this end designer. Anyway, very bad at paying their invoices, this company, not paying on time, things like this. What Agile does and what we do is we pay that contractor for the hours that they've done, when they've done them, and when they've been approved, and then carry the risk and carry the debt and chase the client for that later. So especially in scenarios when sometimes a company might have 90-day payment terms, but you as the end designer, oh my gosh, that's a lot. Like, can I have 14-day payment terms or 30-day payment terms? Yes, you can. You will get paid, and then we will chase the invoice later. So some of that clockwork and peace of mind, even though now there's some administrative costs involved or things like that, when you're a freelancer that maybe doesn't want to go around chasing your invoices, having to hassle that end client, doing certain things like that. In some cases, when maybe that client is structured a bit differently, and it sounds like with some of your clients, Joanne, they're very reliable, they're very trustworthy, you can trust them, they're good like that, then that's excellent. But some exist that are a little bit more difficult. That means that designer is looked after, is paid on time for the work that they've done. The risk is carried by someone else, and then they're chasing. Fortunately for me and for Agile and this payroll company, they do get paid. They carry the risk, but they do get it in the end. They make sure that they get paid and things get evened out. But that designer, they're doing the work, they're getting paid like clockwork. It almost feels like they have a full-time job. If they work the hours, they log the hours, and their hours are improved by their manager, they're getting paid. That's happening. And it's going to come every other Friday or whenever it does. So there are some
That's
that
great.
can be a pro in certain situations where maybe as the freelancer, you can't carry that risk, that admin, things like that. Again, there is some fee involved for admin, and then the recruiter gets something. But I would hope that you as an individual could see the value in having your recruiter make a little bit of money out of that scenario for what they're doing and what they're trying to set up and how they're trying to help you get this work and do this work and be in this job. Because without that recruiter, you likely wouldn't have that position. So there is a value that the recruiter brings, and the recruiter should get paid for that. It is a profession too.
We ain't doing this pro bono, baby.
Just to clarify, this isn't a charity.
Our cats need fancy feasts too. Our dogs need our, kibbles.
Kibble is not cheap.
Kibbles.
I don't have a dog, but
oh, that's right. That's right. We got to get you a pet, Jared. We got to get you
goldfish.
Oh, that's right.
Or
that's
any
right.
kind of fish, really.
All right, goldfish flakes. You need your goldfish flakes.
Those, the good ones, right? Yeah. So it's a reminder, if you feel like you're being hard done by contracting through a recruiter, like check a few of these details. Are you really is there a value that they brought to you? Because I would think that there is. There, look, like anything, there's always going to be some bad players that, are disrupting it for others. But there is a value that recruiter brought to you in, helping you set that up on that contract, and they deserve to be paid for it. It is a profession. Just in case anyone was wondering, being a recruiter is a profession.
It is. I was going to say that we help people in the same way. If it was a full-time job, we're still going to help prepare you and tell you what to expect, and
still have a shared goal of getting that job.
Yeah. Right. And I think there's something else that is really fantastic that a lot of candidates say if they don't work with a recruiter who is a good recruiter, they have no idea how they did after each interview round. There is such opaqueness to the process, but we have that relationship with the hiring manager, with the HR person, with the hiring panel usually. So we're able to tell you hey, here's where you're doing really great. This is where maybe the client still has some questions. You might still need to prove yourself in X, Y, and Z area. So here's the best way to prep. So I think having that, like, that holding hand, like somebody who's cheerleading for you, who wants good things for you, but is also giving you information that's really helpful to like you landing the job, I think is huge, huge.
Yeah. Yeah. It's worthwhile. So when you see a low rate out there at times for a role that you're looking at, there are many factors that maybe have gone into that rate and how you're seeing it. I think sometimes acknowledging like that maybe isn't a great opportunity or a great role. Maybe that company is a little misinformed. Is it through a recruiter? Okay. Maybe they've missed something, or, maybe it's through not a great recruiter and they are trying to, my French, take the piss. And that's not great. So if that's the case, just being aware of that. But I do feel like a lot of people are thinking that rates are getting really low and that people are being expected to do, some crazy jobs, some very high level jobs for very bare bones pricing. And there are some of those things going on, but not the norm. I think they are a little bit the exception. I think that there are many contract designers, freelance designers, being paid well, being paid appropriately for the work that they're doing. And there are many companies that have fair expectations when they set a rate of what they will get for that rate. I really think it's don't get distracted or persuaded. Please talk. Sorry.
I want to make sure that people come away from this chat today with like an understanding of ranges of like your level. Yes. So can we like break it down? Like, what is a rate or a salary for junior, mid, senior, whatever?
Yeah, great.
Yeah. Because I think that a lot of the times I speak to people and they ask me just like, what are you seeing for rates? I can sort of like say like, this is what I'm seeing for this person or that person. Then they're like, okay, so that's like a good gut check. I think I'm in line, or maybe I'm like overthinking it.
Great.
Yeah, definitely. And I have put together a 2024 salary guide for anyone looking for a copy. All right, where would you like to start with it, Erica? What do you think?
Let's start with like full-time salaries.
Permanent salaries for product design.
For product designers, I think obviously it'll change depending maybe on location. I don't know how you guys feel.
Let's try to generalize for the US for the most part.
As much as we can. Okay. Starting at the bottom.
Juniors, I will say I haven't had a ton of insight on because I don't get to hire a lot of them. And sometimes for a junior role, I think if someone's offering you a salary, you should take it. But I think junior roles, I still see really probably more like 80 to 90K on the base.
Yeah.
On a base salary at maybe 70 to 90 if we're thinking nationwide.
Yeah. And that's like right out of school or
pretty fresh.
Yeah, pretty fresh.
1 year experience, pretty fresh.
Yeah, I don't have the data on that because we don't rep juniors. We're 2 years and up. I just don't.
No, well, yeah, it's the same for us. There's not much of a demand from companies we work with to hire a junior necessarily. And if they are hiring a junior, it might be something they just engage in doing them themselves without.
They might have campus recruiting or something.
Yeah. So mid-level product designer, say 2 to 4 years, would you say, Joanne? Like based on where you sort of kick things off?
Yeah.
When you start working with designers?
Yep. Yeah. Curious what you guys are seeing. So I would say, well, just to give you a benchmark, so 2022 salaries, I saw mid-levels making 200K plus, which is not happening these days.
Sorry.
Like take the RSUs and the base and everything else. It was just these crazy packages at big companies that could afford it. I would say now, I know that we just said, things haven't come down so far since 2021 or 2020. But I think this is like the more like
reality.
I would say mid-level tends to be between like 120 and 140, maybe 150. I kind of feel like 150 is that break point of like when it might start getting into senior. I think 150 is pretty low for a senior even today. I'd say 120 to 140. And is that what you guys are tending to see for mid-level too?
I would say the same. Base salary. This is base salary numbers we're talking to.
Yeah.
Nothing on top. This is just cash.
I think nationally we did skip like $20,000 though. So between 90 and 120, what happened there? So I think like I see like the junior mid levels, kind of the people who maybe are no longer associate product designers and product designers it just depends. I would say like New York, San Francisco. I mean, I'm scared of San Francisco to be honest, but like 110 to 135-ish, maybe. It depends on a company. It depends like if it's a startup, if it's an enterprise, if they're remote and based in the South. I don't know.
So very similar ballparks, basically.
Yeah. The senior product designer title, I find to be one of the broadest ranges. There are many things to come with that. I think whenever we say a title, that's great, but anytime you hear a title, strip that away and ask what are the actual responsibilities and the expectations, and look at the money, and that's probably a better indicator of the level. Sometimes just saying senior, it doesn't tell enough. I think that senior, probably starts around that 150, and for some places goes all the way up to probably about 190K as a senior product designer. But then other places might at that 190 end call it a lead as well. So you start to see some difference. I think at the lower 150 end, there's people maybe getting that senior title, and if they're at that 150 kind of salary, maybe in another company, they wouldn't be called a senior. They'd just be called a straight product designer. But I definitely see some companies, especially earlier stage companies, maybe looking at that salary of around 150 to 160 and wanting to call the person a senior, but their experience, on paper might be a little less than their senior counterparts at, a slightly higher salary at 180 at a different company. So yeah, I don't know if you see the same. I find it to be a really broad one, senior.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, I think it's about the same.
Do. I think in terms of just something that sparked in my brain when you said that is, I think we're talking about like money specifically in terms of negotiation, getting what you want. But sometimes there's like non-monetary things that you can negotiate for.
Always.
Don't cost the company anything. It might be some sort of like organizational cost, like it might be a pain in the butt for them. But if you're coming in and they have like a senior product designer spot open, but the responsibilities are kind of a senior. I'm seeing that a lot, actually, that people are asking for mids, but they actually want somebody with senior skills. They just don't want to pay for the senior. I think if you can go in, if the money's amenable to you, you can do the job, but you really think it should be more of a senior, then sometimes you can just ask, like, are you open to this having a senior title? Which for them might be a huge organizational headache for them. And they just can't do it. Doesn't mean that they don't want to do it. It just might mean that they can't. But if they're, especially if they're kind of like smaller and funkier and more startup-y and more fluid, and there aren't these like, really calcified processes on the inside, sometimes that's something that they could give you. So I think it's like worth just seeing like, what are the non-monetary things that you can also negotiate for? Title, working from home or offsite, benefits. Sometimes those can be, maybe there's like an educational stipend or things like that you can also negotiate for.
Yeah, good point. Good point. What would be the next bracket up? We see maybe lead product designer, or then we start to get into things like staff product designer if we stay on that IC track.
Yeah, I would staff and principal. I'm just thinking of the player coach stuff that we're all talking and hearing about right now.
What are you hearing?
Okay. Well, then I think that starts to head into manager and director titling. I see the fork at that point. Once you hit senior and then maybe lead, then the fork begins of either staff and then principal, I feel, is higher than staff, which is an IC track, or product design manager, maybe, might be a title, senior manager, director, senior director, VP. You start going up like that.
Which still probably hands-on and in the weeds.
Still probably player coach as a director, Chief design officer, also pushing pixels.
Yeah, I know. It depends on the company. Definitely depends on the company, yeah.
Cool.
That's funny that you think that principal is higher than staff. I actually kind of think of them as being interchangeable. So I think of like either a company has a principal or a staff.
Okay.
I actually I haven't seen that personally, that like, oh, there's one that's like lower than the other. So that's interesting. I haven't really seen that whole concept of like non-management, but super, super seasoned people. I think in like very design-led companies, like, probably Apple had them for ages, but I think like as a broader market term, I don't think those roles have been around that long. Like I've only really seen staff and principal maybe in the past 5 years, something like that. It's relatively newer.
Yeah, I felt like the idea behind a lot of them was not having a financial penalty to not become a manager. There are
Yeah,
many
yeah.
designers specifically that love the craft, love the tools, want to do that, operate at a very high level strategically, just don't want to people manage. And
Yeah.
maybe that's not their strength, but their strength is actually doing the work and
Mhm.
leading the work, but not leading the people and doing career management type work.
Yeah.
So I think that those levels came out for that. Yeah, you're right. Interchangeable a little bit, but I am starting to see more companies lean into more high level ICs. There's definitely demand, and creating structure and leveling, like a difference between a staff, a senior staff, a principal, to create growth plans and growth progression for good ICs as well. So I'm definitely starting to see more of that where, yeah, some places means the same thing. Other places it is a difference,
Mhm.
which is good because it means that you have a growth path. If you come in as a staff,
Yeah.
then you can aspire to grow to principal
And
as
those
well.
people can make a lot of money too. Like staff can be on the same level or principal can be on the same level as a director or senior
They should
director,
be. They
right?
absolutely should
And
be.
then probably in some design-led companies, maybe even VP, just to
Yep.
tackle the salaries at director. So I think so going back to
Mm-hmm.
lead, yes, I'm
Yep.
seeing leads come in between like 160 to maybe 190, maybe
Mm-hmm.
200. And then director is actually a pretty broad term too, because
Yep.
director could be I'm overseeing one or two people. It could also mean I'm overseeing like 10 or 15 people with a layer of management in there. So I'm managing
Mm.
managers that are, then in turn managing other people. So I think it really depends. I think the team size has a big thing to do with like how
Mm-hmm.
high the salary is going to go. So, maybe a baby director at like a small company where you're not like overseeing a ton of people,
Sure.
little baby director might
Yep.
be like 180. That could actually, 180 to
Mm.
200,
Mm-hmm.
which would
Yeah.
almost kind of be like a lead with like a couple direct reports. So I don't think that's actually
Yep.
too onerous. I
No.
would say probably like mid-range if you take all the directors and like the team sizes. I
Yep.
would say probably between 225 and 250 is what we're
Yeah.
seeing.
Yep.
Of course, it was higher a couple years ago, but we're living in the now, Wayne. So I
Mm-hmm.
think, yeah, that's where I'm tending to see that stuff. And then VP might be like 275, 300, low
Yep.
300s. They tend to be making a lot of equity or like RSU. So there's usually some package above that on
Mm-hmm.
top of base. But that's generally where I'm seeing things, and curious if that's kind of where you're seeing things too, you guys.
I think that's
Yeah.
pretty much
Yeah.
spot on.
Yeah.
So much nuance to it, but I would generalize it
Yeah.
broadly that way as well.
Cool.
I have one more thing. So I know that we shouldn't go through this for like the hourly rates, but if you were to tell
Okay.
someone how to determine what their hourly rate would be based on either their current salary or desired salary, how would you
Yep.
tell them to calculate that?
Mm.
Halve their salary and then take off 3 zeros basically or thereabouts. If you wanted like say 150K a year, you're a senior hands-on designer pushing pixel, doing your thing, then the equivalent of that is probably 75 an hour ish, because it's half of that 150, about 75. But obviously as a contractor, no benefits, no health care, or that it can be a little bit different to add that in. It's you don't get the same kind of benefits as being a full-time employee. So can you add a little bit of a premium on top of that to make it worthwhile? So 150 then becomes 75 an hour, which maybe then becomes 85 an hour, might equal it out or thereabouts. That's my general rule of thumb.
Yeah, I usually
Yeah.
tell people to add to it.
Yep. Yeah.
I will say I've seen people say, I'm 150K, I'm also 150 an hour, and I'm like, good for you.
Don't know how that adds up, but
Good
awesome.
for you.
Let me
But
know how that works out.
very
Right.
difficult. So that's why we always ask people for a range.
Yeah.
Right. Right. Yes, they'll say that they'll be like, I'm $100 an hour. So that means if I double my rate, that means I'm a 200K resource for full
Yeah.
time. Like, no, it doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
But Jared, I do the exact same thing that you do, and what
Okay.
sounds like you do, Erica, like, half it, add a little bit more for benefits, and also the fact that as a freelancer, you're not guaranteed to be working constantly. So it's
Yeah.
also like factoring in the downtime of you, like, having to
Mhm.
hustle between jobs to find your next one, which, you need a little bit of ballast for that too.
You're not
Yeah.
paid. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So look, there's a bit to go into it for sure, but I think that's a pretty good general rule of thumb. I think a great recruiter will provide you guidance on your rates and what you quote. And I'll be the first to say, and I'm certain that you have both done this too, we will also let you know if you're underquoting yourself.
Yes.
If you're
definitely.
saying salaries that I think are a little bit low, then I'll say, hey, I love that you have this flexibility and openness, but I think market-wise, the next time you have a chat with someone about this, start a little bit higher. If you speak to a company direct and you're in some interviews, I think based on your experience, everything that you tell me, just come up just a little bit. I think, or a lot even, but come up. You're quoting a little bit too low. I think that makes you great and competitive, but I think that some of your counterparts could be quoting high numbers and you should be on par with them according to the market. So
I can actually, yeah, it could work against you too. If you're undervaluing yourself and you're coming in like strangely low for what you actually are providing, then it kind of creates this like distrust of like, is this person actually good?
Yeah.
It's good to
Right.
ask people, ask your friends like what they're charging, or sort of just to get an idea. Hopefully this helped everyone. Or just even talk to a recruiter just to make sure that you're in line or whatever. I mean, I've absolutely had people where I've been like, dude, you are charging way too low. And you just don't want to leave money on the table potentially. So, but knowing that like your low number is that low number, your bottom, that's good for you to keep close to your chest. But always negotiate high, start high.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for kicking that off, Erica. That was such a great discussion. And I'm sure a lot of people are just like, what should I charge? What should I do? So thanks for doing that.
Yeah. I think many recruiters will have some salary guides or numbers and content that they can put out there to share. So definitely ping your local design recruiter. We are slightly over time, but we covered a lot. As always, hit us with questions after the fact. Hit us with things you want to discuss, things you want to talk about. Thanks again, you two, for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, our pleasure. Thank you for having us. And Will Stevens, you're welcome for the call.
Yep.
Dimitri, thanks for all your awesome comments. And we're looking forward to seeing you guys.
More questions.
Yeah, keep them coming. Keep them coming.
Yeah.
Thank you, Logan Lewis. Yeah. Thank you all. It's very helpful. Thank you. All right, I'm going to hit the end stream button now.
Okay.
Talk to you guys soon.
Right.
Bye.
Bye, y'all.